again and welcome. My name is Nasser Zawiya. I am the Dean of the Graduate School, very proudly to say appointed 2 days ago. Thank you very much. President Dooley, distinguished guests, faculty and students, today we're making history at URI. This event presents an across-the-board sampling of the thinking that takes place on our campus. I know while many of us, we go to our own professional conferences and organizations, and we look at posters and work of our peers, it's very unusual that we have an event where we can see a multitude of disciplines from the sciences to the arts, gathered together in one place. This event has grown out of the inauguration activity that was organized by the graduate school last year. The president and the provost enjoyed it so much, it was very hard to peel them off posters. Especially President Dooley was reading every single poster. And I could not blame him, because that showed we're serving the whole university on a plate, and gives you an appreciation of what's going on our campus. This year, President Dooley has challenged us to make this into a signature event, to make this into a tradition. So what you're about to experience is the fruits of the Division of Academic Affairs, as elevated and promoted by the Division of Advancement, and as supported by the Division of Research and Economic Development. 3 divisions of the university working together to put this event and show you what we can do at URI. So this is Discovery at URI, and we welcome you to it. There are many people to thank, for putting this event together, and I'm just going to mention them as we go along, but some of them really deserve mention at the outset. And first and foremost is Michelle Grambley, who's sitting there waving her hands and very nervous. Michelle is really, from the graduate school, is the epicenter of this event, that has really worked and poured her heart and feelings, and read every abstract, edited every scientific term, made sure that every detail is really working together in cohesion for us. And I also would like to mention Paul Witham and Joanne Sposito. Paul, thank you, Paul and Joanne, who have done a wonderful job helping us put this together and make it a professional event. And also I would like to mention Brian Gallagher and Dean Maslin for giving us this library and this venue to work on. Now, I would like to introduce President Dooley to come and tell you more about why we're having this event, because he's the one who's really pushed us, inspired us, and made us put this together. President Dooley.
Thank you all for joining us. I apologized already to one of our distinguished panelists, Paul Hastings, who came a long way to be here from much nicer weather than what we're able to show him today. But since he's a URI grad and a long-time occupant of the Northeast in New England, I don't think he's surprised by what he finds here in April with regard to weather. So thank you all for joining us. This is an important event for URI, the first of what I hope will be a whole series of these stretching out for the foreseeable future. And it really has a very simple purpose. That became abundantly clear a year ago, when an event like this one today was organized as part of my inauguration as the 11th president of the University of Rhode Island. And a number of things came out of that event that were quite striking. First and foremost was the enormous range and the very high quality of the research, scholarship, and creative work that's being done at the University of Rhode Island. I don't think it's adequately appreciated in the state, and even frequently among stakeholders who know us well. And it's not well appreciated, I think, not as well as it should be anyway, more broadly. That was one thing. The second thing was to see the excitement on so many people's faces when they discovered that work was going on at URI that was similar to their own work, that they were not aware of. We saw this at panel presentations, we saw this in the poster session, we saw this in the discussions afterwards. And new collaborations and new partnerships were born from those mutual discoveries that that people really would not have made except for the fact that we had an event that brought them together, put them in proximity, and allowed them to present their work and to notice what other people were doing at the same time. The third thing that sort of led to the rationale, I guess, for doing this on a regular basis and promoting it is, I think, the opportunity it provides for our students. URI is increasingly a university that seeks to engage its undergraduates, and certainly for a long time has done that and has excelled at engaging graduate students in its graduate programs in the work of discovery and knowledge creation and creative work and innovation. But that's going to be an increasingly important part of undergraduate education at the University of Rhode Island, across the board, in all the disciplines. And one of the things that we can emphasize in an annual event like this is the engagement of our students with our faculty, many of whom are world leaders in their fields, in discovery and innovation at the University of Rhode Island. And I think we want that to be a hallmark of what it means to get a baccalaureate degree at the University of Rhode Island, that you've had the opportunity, and more than the opportunity, you've taken advantage of that to have the chance to learn in ways that you would not otherwise be able to learn by engaging in the work of innovation and discovery directly as a student, outside of the normal classroom environment, in whatever environment is appropriate for your discipline. Experiential learning is certainly an important part of much of what we do at the University of Rhode Island, and what we want to do is broaden and expand that so that it's a part of everything that we do in undergraduate education at the University of Rhode Island. So those are what led us to today. And I think that's the rationale going forward. And it's something that I think we will see in the posters. We're just looking through the abstracts last night and seeing, again, the range of the work covering nanotechnology to nursing that's going on here, all the disciplines. And the quality of that work, I think, is very inspiring. And that's going to be shared with us throughout the day by our students and faculty, by panelists and others. And it highlights the fact that one of the things that makes a research university like the University of Rhode Island unique in higher education in Rhode Island, in public higher education in Rhode Island, is that mission of discovery and innovation. That's at the heart of who we are. It's at the heart of what we do. It's what it means to be a land-grant research university. The University of Rhode Island does it well. It's going to do it better, and I think that will benefit everyone in the state as we do. So thank you very much for joining us. It's a delight to see you here, and I hope that we have a very good day together, looking at the work, appreciating it, talking about it, and building on it for the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, President Dooley. And I have to remind our speakers, the President has set protocol for us in the past. None of us should speak longer than the President. So we should keep it very brief. But one thing you can recognize is that, if what they say is true, that an institution will reflect the culture of its leadership. And we have, as a leader, a scientist of the first rate who really appreciates scholarship, innovation, and discovery. And I'm sure he's going to push us to rise into higher and higher levels as a research university. Next, I'd like to introduce our Vice President for Research and Economic Development, Peter Alfonso. And Dr. Alfonso is really the head of our research enterprise, and he can, give you some words on how it all ties up with economic development and innovation. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you. That's a heck of a thing for him to say, don't speak longer than my boss. I wish you probably could have waited a half hour. Well, I will try, but I'm not sure that I can do it. Let me start by saying I'm so pleased that Keith Stokes is here because, as the President indicated, we are a land grant, a sea grant, and an urban grant institution. And so we were born out of the land grant mission. And that is what we do primarily is designed to serve our wonderful state. And we are joined at the hip with the EDC in the 4 short years that I've been here. It's actually clear to me that we work much more closely than I think folks have in the past, and a lot of that has to do with you, Keith, so thanks for coming. I've been asked to talk a bit about the research enterprise in general, but to talk more about how the research enterprise is actually, oh, and I see Christine Smith sitting right behind us. I'm sorry I didn't see you, Christine, who is the person that runs the Science and Technology Advisory Council, which is part of the EDC. And we've been, I guess we stood up the STC about 7 years ago. And actually URI was one of the original players that actually started this off. So I'm happy you're both here. So what I want to focus on very quickly is to talk about how we actually engage with the private sector. So that's where I actually intend to end up. The research division, and its full name is actually the Division of Research and Economic Development, is fairly new. We're about 4 years old now. We actually moved out of the Division of Academic Affairs, so we're the newest and fifth division of the institution. In fact, my predecessor was the dean of the graduate school, and so a lot of things moved out of academic affairs, but the grad school stayed there. So we set up this new organization that's fairly standard. That is, when folks talk about R&D, things like research and development, S&T, science, and technology, we have research and economic development. It's almost the same. So one part of our group, actually, we now have 7 offices. We've been growing the past few years. We have 3 offices that works on that front end, the R and R&D, or the S and S&T. Some of our folks are here. I saw Karen Markin, who's in the back. She heads up the office of research development. That's where faculty can go to find out where to find funding and get all kinds of help. Mary Kate DeMarco may not be here, and she runs the Office of Sponsored Programs. That's where we center the actual proposals out, and if we're lucky enough to funding, they come in and we manage them there. And then we have another group that's involved in research compliance, everything from proper treatment of humans and animals and things like recombinant DNA. That's the front end. The back end that I want to talk about a bit more is also 3 offices. We have the typical tech transfer office. In fact, we just hired a brand new assistant vice president for intellectual property management who's on the road today and can't be here. But that's where we take the products and technologies out of the research enterprise to move into the marketplace. I forgot to mention one important thing before I get to the back end. I want to get back to the front end, and that we're doing extremely well there. We've increased the amount of external funding coming into the state over the past 4 years by 60%, which is huge. It's a relatively short amount of time. So 2 years ago, we set a record where URI brought in a total of $85 million. Last year in FY10, we brought in $105 million. The reason that's important is this is a very expensive proposition. No one funds it but us. So we are really a tub on its own bottom. So to be able to bring in more money every year is true testament to the quality of the research that all our faculty were actually engaged. So we have the tech transfer operation. We have the Office of External Research Affairs that's headed up by Melissa McCarthy, who makes a lot of contacts with us, with the private sector. And finally, we have the Research Foundation that we stood up about 2 years ago. That's a 501c3 that allows us to be much more quick and nimble than any state entity could ever be, and actually having to serve as the board chair. I want to mention 3 examples of how we're working more closely with the private sector, and these are 3 very recent examples. For example, last Thursday, we actually rolled out the Rhode Island Consortium for Nanoscience and Nanotechnology. This is joint work between URI and Brown University. And this group focuses on things like nanomaterials, nanohealth, nanotools, and nanoenergy. The URI lead is Professor Bose. I saw him earlier. Richard, are you around? Still here? There he is. Just stand, please. And he is the PI of a grant that we got from DOE last year. It was a large grant, $1.25 million, if I recall correctly. And that actually funded this thing. The point that I want to mention is some of those funds will be used to seed actual partnerships with the private sector. at this meeting we had on Thursday. It was very well attended. We had 40 representatives from various industries that have issues related to nano. So we are moving forward in a very cutting-edge area. The second that I want to mention is that 2 days ago, in this very building on the first floor, we hosted a very significant symposium on cybersecurity. It was very well attended. We had over 300 people here. We had national leading figures. In fact, we had a 4-star general who actually runs the National Security Agency, and he heads up the U.S. Cybercom. We had Congressman Langevin and Senator Whitehouse, and folks from the FBI, from folks like DARPA. We had lots of people here. What's important about that is that we've shown that URI is a very good. We have faculty and our faculty here doing really good work in this area, which has drawn lots of interest. So we have already been approached by about a dozen members from the industry that need help on all kinds of issues related to cyber, and we are now actually putting together this task force between those faculty at URI and about 10 or 12 companies as far. We have just rolled that out. And the last thing that I want to mention is that we are now working with Brown University and Draper Lab. Draper is part of MIT and URI to form this new consortium that we will call the Rhode Island Energy Center. We'll work on things like wind energy, salt water derived from biofuels, and things like fuel cells. So we have a lot of these things going on as well. And we understand from the very beginning that we can't do the D in R&D or the T in S&T unless we partner with you. So from the very onset, we will bring in these partnerships with the private sector. So I'm afraid I'm going to talk longer than my boss if I go longer. I wish I had, because there's so much to tell you. We're doing so many great things here. It's really a very exciting time for us. But I better end here. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. Dr. Alfonso has told you how much our research enterprise has been growing in the past few years, and that we are, the flagship public research university in the state of Rhode Island, and we need to be known more and more for that. In addition to our growth in our research enterprise, you should realize that our graduate school is also significantly large. We have about 58 graduate programs, and we have about 3,000 graduate students, many of whom you'll see their research today as you walk around. And we would like, research experience to be part of our undergraduate education and experience as well. We offer this both for all our students, graduates and undergraduates. Next, I'm going to invite Vice President Bob Deagle, who will say a few words about the involvement of a number of folks that made this happen and what the Division of Advancement can do to help us elevate research and innovation.
Thank you, Nurse. As has been mentioned, this began last year with President Dooley's inauguration, and we realized that of the many outcomes, one of them is that it gives us a great story to tell, and we need to tell the story about the kinds of research being done at the university, and also the way that our students, both undergraduate and graduate, are directly working with faculty in these great projects. So this is a wonderful story for all of us, and particularly the Advancement Division, to get out there and be telling. The President has also emphasized in his 2 years here collaboration and partnerships. And we're really happy that this particular event is an excellent example of internal collaboration, academic affairs, research development, university advancement, all working closely together. But one of the things that we said we wanted to do this year, as opposed to last year, was push this out a little bit, and let's get more external people involved. And that's why we have speakers, and we have panelists today, and we've used this to engage the external community. And particularly, I want to thank the South Kingstown Chamber of Commerce and its Executive Director, Joe Iacocca, whom I know is here somewhere. They've been a tremendous help and also provided support, enabling us to make a lot of today's activities possible. And Joe's been a valuable resource, and he's gotten the business community involved. And we also had Jody Alves, who is here today. I was talking with her earlier. There she is. Jody wrote me a letter about a year ago, and she has a son who's a student at the Rochester Institute of Technology, and she had gone up there for their big weekend event like this, and she said, I think this would be a great thing for URI to do, and I wrote back and said, well, you and President Dooley think alike, because he would like us to do more of these kind of things too, and we're kind of moving down the track. So she came in and she's worked with people in my division and some of the folks in academic affairs, and she was a great resource today too. And Jody, we thank you for your interest and your help. And you drove all the way down from Providence in this terrible in the rain, so we thank you for that. Anyway, I'm just very happy that this is such a collaboration internally and externally, and it is a wonderful story to tell. And thanks to everybody who's participating and making this a great day.
Next, we move on to our keynote speaker, and our keynote speaker is Keith Stokes. He's the Executive Director of the Rhode Island Economic Development Corporation. Keith Stokes was appointed in January 2010 to the position of Executive Director of the Rhode Island Economic Development Corporation. He is Chairman of the Board of the Quonset Development Corporation, as well as the Slater Technology Fund. Prior to his appointment, Mr. Stokes served as board member and treasurer of the Rhode Island Economic Development Corporation and as a board member of the Quonset Development Corporation. Mr. Stokes was the executive director of the Newport County Chamber of Commerce for over 15 years. Prior to his success at the Chamber, he worked as a senior policy advisor to Rhode Island Governor Bruce Sunderland, was executive director of the Omni Development Corporation, and senior policy advisor to the Rhode Island General Treasurer. Mr. Stokes is also a frequent national, state, and local lecturer in community and regional planning, especially in historic preservation and interpretation with an expertise in early African and Jewish American history. It is really a great pleasure to have Keith with us, and I really welcome him to the podium. Thank you, Keith.
I'm just happy to make it to walk to the podium. I want to particularly thank President Dooley, who's also a member with our governor of the Board of Directors of the Economic Development Corporation. I think you know it, but I think finally the state has realized that we've got a great asset in not only URI, but certainly in Dr. Dooley. And certainly want to thank the Dean and my great friend Joe Iacocca for inviting me to come down. My staff had put together a very comprehensive, as they always do, a very comprehensive speaking points about discovery at URI, and particularly a discussion about how scholarship, research, and innovation drive economies. And I'll certainly follow those notes because I don't want to disappoint my staff. But I also want to talk very openly and honestly as we begin to realign economic resources within the state and begin to build a more substantive and competitive Rhode Island economy. And I want to frame it, I think, in really three specific areas. One, a historical perspective, where we were and how we were leaders in innovation and culture for so many generations before. I want to talk what is in place today and what we'll be building upon that we think are critical strengths, and I'll walk through the number of active partnerships and collaborations that we have with higher education institutions, particularly here at URI. And then I want to end with challenges, not the bad news, but the challenges that we have to overcome in the areas of workforce preparation and training and education, and also our own parochialism. And I want to be able to emphasize the parochialism because I live in Newport. I drove this morning all the way to Providence for a 7:30 morning meeting. Then I drove all the way down here to Kingston to URI for a meeting. I'll be back in Providence and I have a meeting in Middletown. I will guarantee you each and every part of my journey, someone will say, that was a long way. That was a long drive. So one of the great challenges that we have is our own provincial parochial nature, which stands in the way of collaboration. and particularly the fact that Rhode Island's greatest asset is anything we do should be innovation at scale. We are not California, thank goodness. We're not Texas, thank goodness. We are Rhode Island. So anything we do and we do well, we can do more efficiently, more effectively with innovation, design, and implementation at scale. So the parochialism is something we need to work on. But let me talk about it from a historical perspective. From a historical perspective, it's important to recognize about how cherished our Rhode Island history is. Rhode Island, at our very founding in the early 17th and later 18th century, was the center for American international maritime trade and commerce. In fact, by 1770, the years leading up to the American Revolution, Newport and Bristol combined were two of the largest shipping ports in all the Americas. And in fact, the very first American business cartel established not in Philadelphia, not Boston, but in Newport, and a group of merchants from Newport, Bristol, and Providence came together in Newport and established what later would be called the United Spermaceti Manufacturing Company. And this company manufactured sperm whale oil because several merchants who had come from the Iberian Peninsula, Spain, Portugal, via the Azores, other merchants who had come and had traveled and had invested in the Caribbean, had all come together in Rhode Island, had figured out something very unique. They had figured out that at that time, the only source of light was a candle, and most candles were made from beeswax. And these men had come together and had figured out through innovation and testing and research at that time, this is the 18th century now, not 21st century, they figured out that that waxy brain matter in spermaceti whales that were initially caught off the coast of Africa and the Azores and then later in the West Indies, that pussy, waxy brain matter could be boiled and cured and molded and become a candle and would last 5 times longer than beeswax. So these men came together, they perfected the trade. There were 2 distilleries in Providence, 7 in Newport, 1 in Bristol, and with these men coming together, they perfected an innovation and technology deployment where these Rhode Island merchants cornered the entire world market in spermaceti candle making, which lit the world at that time. So it's important to recognize that these men and these families that established themselves took full advantage of the fact that one of the greatest assets that we have in this state is Narragansett Bay. Narragansett Bay is a compact, very narrow, but very deep channel natural bay system. Unlike Charleston or Savannah or Baltimore or New York, we have a very compact and a very deep channel, meaning we can bring ships of great draft and depth and size and move them from ports to facility to open ocean more efficiently here in Rhode Island. Now with our ports at Davisville, at Quonset, and our ports at Providence, more efficiently, more effectively than Baltimore and Norfolk and many other facilities. And those merchants understood that in the 18th century. And then in the 19th century, the next group of immigrants and entrepreneurs who would come to the state recognized that as the bay was an important waterway for transportation, innovation, and access to worldwide markets, they then began to figure out in the 19th century that our riverways, anchored by the Blackstone, the Patuxent River, which ran north to south across the colony and now state, would also provide a vehicle to power engines, to power factories, and thus the Industrial Revolution. And by the mid-19th century, Rhode Island was the leading producer of a number of the textile and Worcester mills, more so than anywhere else in the world. 80% of the Worcester textiles to England came via cotton bales of the southern part of this country, but the Worcester materials and the byproducts from Pawtucket, from Westerly, Peacedale, Central Falls, and all the villages, because we have many villages, all the villages were created along these mills and the workforce and the technology that provided them. And that carried us into the 20th century and well past World War II. And today, now that we're in the beginning of the 21st century, we've gone to a innovation of maritime trade, to innovation of textile and industrial, to now we're moving into really an information technology-driven, a technology-driven society and industry. And now we're seeing Rhode Island moving to that next level. That next level has to be carried by and supported by and sustained by scholarship, research, and innovation. And that anchors our university systems. Today, the great assets that we have within the state, the great economic assets, are now built upon not spermaceti candle making, not textile making, but clearly the innovation that's coming out of scholarship research of our universities. And you will see, and I'll explain in the next few minutes, how some of the leading industry clusters in this region, anchored here within Rhode Island, are all directly tied. Their growth of innovation, their development of products, the R&D process, their workforce education and training is all directly tied to the quality of the higher education institutions, both public and private, that we have in this state, in this region. In fact, what we take for granted is that people outside of Rhode Island and people outside of New England recognize New England. Running from Massachusetts through Rhode Island into Connecticut, we have some of the finest, highest higher education institutions in the world clustered in about a 50-mile trip, 50 to 60-mile trip. Long trip for us, no one else in the world. So when you think of the anchor institutions in Massachusetts and Connecticut, but when you really understand those anchor institutions here in Rhode Island, on public universities, University of Rhode Island, Community College of Rhode Island, Rhode Island College, you think of our fine private institutions from Providence College, Brown University, Salve, Roger Williams, and so on. We have one of the strongest clusters of higher educational institutions in the world, in New England, right here within Rhode Island. And each and every one of them is driving some level of economic innovation and development through R&D, through workforce preparation. That is an absolute essential ingredient to succeed and excel in a 21st century-based economy. Alongside our higher education institutions and the Narragansett Bay, our third significant economic asset is the cluster of life science institutions that we have, again, generally in the New England corridor, from Mass through Rhode Island to Connecticut, but particularly anchored in our capital city of Providence. These life science institutions, these medical facilities, these teaching hospitals are unprecedented in their ability to not only help engage the communities, the states, the regions, the world's health, but they are also at the cutting edge of research, and that research supports jobs. And those jobs are aligned not only in the institutions themselves, but the spin-offs of medical device equipment companies, the laboratories, the small suppliers and vendors who are directly a part of a supply chain because a Rhode Island hospital is vibrant within this state, because a Brown Medical School will soon to be completed and is vibrant in this state. So the next very important industry cluster that we have within the state that we are building upon and will continue to build upon the areas of life sciences. The next cluster that's very important for us to recognize and will be directly dependent upon, particularly the University of Rhode Island, in its work and assistance in expanding our advanced manufacturing niche. Leslie Tatru's here. She knows this much better than I and most of us. She runs the Rhode Island Manufacturing Extension Program. She provides a direct access and lifeline to support the very vibrant manufacturing economy that we have here today in this state. If someone tells you that manufacturing is dying or ebbing, they don't understand the nature of manufacturing. We are literally transforming from a low-skill, low-wage, high-volume manufacturing base to a high-skill, high-wage, technology-driven, lean manufacturing base. And the types of manufacturers in this state, just to give you a few that you might recognize the name, who are not only sustaining themselves, but they're growing in jobs and innovation and technology deployment, Raytheon Company, Toray Industries, thin film plastics in North Kingston, Electric Boat. These are all well-known manufacturers who are growing. They've deployed technology, and with that technology, they're more efficient and more effective in delivering their product to the marketplace. And Rhode Island has an opportunity to seize upon the talented manufacturers, small and large, in this state, and give them direct access to education, training, technology deployment, technology transfers, so they can bring more products to the marketplace and, in turn, contribute greatly to the state's tax base and contribute greatly to the state's employment base. The next industry sector, which is one of my favorites, which is greatly unknown within this state, is what we call our defense industry. And in most people's mind, when they think of defense, they think of naval facilities or Air Force facilities or Army bases, but very few people would realize that the late, great Senator Pell, in the mid-1970s, and he coined this phrase, in the mid to late 1970s, Rhode Island had lost the Atlantic Fleet operations of the United States Navy. Those facilities were based in Newport and Middletown and based at Quonset. We saw overnight, from 1972 to 1974, we lost over 20,000 military civilian jobs within a 2-year period. We talk about the 11.2% unemployment rate. We had an 18% unemployment rate on the Quinnipiac Island and North Kingston alone at that time. So there was a tremendous need to fill that gap. We weren't going to be an Atlantic Fleet naval base facility. We needed to be something different, in something more sustaining. And Senator Pell coined this phrase where he simply said in his own way, we're going to swap swabbies for scientists. And his vision was a vision where the strengths of the United States Navy and defense-related activity here shouldn't simply be ships and ship services and docks and facilities, because that can go anywhere. Norfolk has those facilities. Miami area, Fort Lauderdale has those facilities. San Diego has those facilities. There are lots of options for those to go. But what we have here is outstanding higher educational institutions in the region. We have an opportunity for deploying our land and our resources to be at the highest level of military-related design and development and deployment. And it was Senator Chafee's vision of swapping scientists with swabbies that we simply went a whole new path where at Quonset we began to acquire property. 25 years later, we have 3,000 acres of an intermodal commerce park anchored by General Dynamics Electric Boat, which now fabricates about 90% of the Virginia-class submarine. That fabrication goes on right here in Rhode Island, which is extraordinary. And now with the new defense budget, they'll be building 2 submarines a year. And we'll be seeing 500 additional employees by early next year, and the potential for upwards of 500 to 600 additional employees over the next several years. That was the Senator's vision. And in Newport, we moved away from being a fleet operation to having now the Center of Excellence, the Naval Undersea Warfare Center, a significant active partner with the University of Rhode Island, particularly with the School of Oceanography and the Graduate School of Oceanography and the Coastal Resource Center. The Naval Undersea Warfare Center is the center of excellence for all undersea acoustics, research, and integrated communication systems. In fact, the Naval Undersea Warfare Center has just under 3,000 employees. 76% of those employees are scientists, are classified as scientists. The only federal agency that has a higher percentage of employees that are scientists, in most cases PhDs, is NASA itself. But even more importantly, the Naval Undersea Warfare Center today puts out about $500 million in vendor contracts and services each year. Last year, $518 million in vendor contracts and services. $300 million came to Rhode Island-based companies. If you talk about a supply chain of economic development, most of the technology-driven, particularly computer science, engineering, design, modeling, systems management firms within this state, a large share of them are primary and secondary contractors to the Naval Undersea Warfare Center. And with the good work of the University of Rhode Island, those same companies are now extending. In the old days, we used to call it market extension. It's really now technology transfer. They're now extending technologies that they perfected under defense contracts, and they're now transferring those technologies into commercial applications. That bridge of technology transfer is a robust university system. And that robust university system has been anchored by the University of Rhode Island. So it's important to recognize that in each and every case, these industry sectors that are growing today, creating jobs and wealth today, life sciences, higher education institutions, defense industries, each and every one of them are equally tied to having a robust, active, engaged higher educational university system. And being a public land grant system, there is no better university than URI that can quickly and efficiently move to connect with these companies, engage these industries, and help us grow this economy going forward. But there are also lots of other great things going on at a program level. And it's important to recognize that as we look at the big sky industries and opportunities, we have to keep our feet on the ground to the fact that each and every day we have to continue to build collaborations and make strategic investments as a state in critical areas of economic development. Now let me be clear. We have a significant challenge before us with the state budget. This is the 4th consecutive year that we've had significant operating deficits. And Governor Chafee is now challenged with closing a $312 million operating operating deficit for year 12. And under our Constitution, he is required, he has submitted a budget to the legislature, and they are required to have a balanced budget by June 30th, or therein, going forward. That's a challenge. Going forward, we need to recognize that this structural deficit, which is caused not as much by ourselves, I know that we are hard on ourselves inwardly, but it's as much caused by the structural nature of the federal government and the deficiencies of national marketplaces. In fact, it was the collapse of the national financial markets that literally restricted access to capital and credit from Wall Street to Main Street. It's a trickle-down. The challenge is that Rhode Island now cannot depend upon any short-term revenue solutions, be it federal stimulus funds or reinvestment of tobacco settlement funds. All the solutions that we've used and deployed for the last 5 years of structural deficits are not before us. We now have to solve this budget, good, bad, or indifferent, painful as it will be, with the resources we have in place. So what's absolutely essential for the governor is we're not going to have the capital resources, the budgetary options that other states are going to have. So we have to be strategic, we have to be focused, and we have to be very focused on the fact that every public dollar we put into economic development, we have to have a measurable cost benefit and return on investment in jobs and taxes back to the state, because we're going to have so few resources to offer. One of the areas that we're clearly focused on is what I've outlined on these competitive industry clusters in science, scholarship, and research. We've had for almost 7 years Christine Smith, who was recognized by Peter. I want to recognize Christine again. Christine is the executive director of our Science Technology Advisory Council. This was established by the governor several years before for the very purpose of bringing together scholarship, innovation, with strategic state investment so that we could develop next stage investments in research and development that could lead towards jobs and industry base. Over the last several years, it has made significant investments in research collaborations that has touched, and help me, Christy, if I'm wrong, it's touched nearly every single public-private institution in this state several times over, and particularly led by our public universities and the University of Rhode Island. This past year, $1.4 million in investments and collaborations. This is a strategic state investment. I wish we could be 2.4 or 5.4 or 10.4, but that 1.4 under Christine's leadership and her board, led by the Collaboration University, is making a difference, and it's creating that nexus. It's seeding that nexus of that next level of technology transfer and collaboration. So what will be an R&D activity today might be the next electric boat, Hasbro, Raytheon, Toray Industries of tomorrow. So it's being seeded here, and it's been a great leadership with our Science Technology Advisory Council. We also have to recognize the fact that with the university and our research and our scientist leadership, we've done very well in attracting federal research dollars. On a per capita basis, we stand with all the other states, and it's a tribute to many of you in this room and others that we've been able to identify and bring more research dollars into the state, which parlays into research, design and innovation, technology transfers, and real jobs and real industries. This past year, led by the University of Rhode Island, our EPSCOR grant, over $20 million, that's going to give us the ability to further strengthen and build our research, education, and training opportunities and collaborations, particularly in the very important area of marine sciences. Remember what I had said, Narragansett Bay is a great asset, a significant natural asset that we've built on and built before, and we need to continue to work with it. And by expanding our marine science capabilities, it provides us not only an opportunity to be able to understand and take the research of Narragansett Bay and using the bay as a beta site for cutting-edge research in the marine scientists, we can then transfer that research or market that research into the broader marketplace for economic gains to the state. Let me give you one classic example of how we've done it and done it better than anyone else. The last 2 days I was down in D.C. at the Northeast Offshore Wind Conference, and it had all the officials from all the eastern states, my counterparts, other counterparts, utility directors, research directors, private developers coming together and talking about how do we move to the next stage of talking about offshore wind investment to having it become a reality. When it was my turn to present, and I followed New Jersey, Delaware, Massachusetts, Long Island is looking at a program. Each and every one of those states have their own programs. It even include the Great Lakes. The Great Lakes have a program of putting in turbines within the lakes. Each and every one of them talked about the challenges of permitting. They talked about the challenges of siting, the political problems of who wants it here and not here, intervening with either view corridors, sailing areas, navigation areas. And I had the opportunity to get up and say, we basically are very close to solving that. In fact, our greatest strength in the siting of our offshore wind opportunity in this state is the number one driver of where we are today is the University of Rhode Island Graduate School of Oceanography, Ocean Engineering program. Because those men and women scientists collaborating with state officials at the Coastal Resource Management Council, with my staff, and developed for the first time within the nation what is called an Ocean Special Area Management Plan. These men and women scientists created a zoning map with an environmental and economic impact statement where we were able to identify and be able to not only identify the site and location where turbines can be sited, we were able to, with great research and data and science, be able to predict what those impacts would be on the natural environment, on the man-made environment, and we're able to put that in a single system that allowed us to expedite before any other state the ability to be the first in the water in America with an offshore wind utility scale program. That would not have happened if it wasn't for URI Ocean Engineering. And now, one of the jokes that I had at that forum was, geez, maybe this is a product or technology we might want to transfer. Maybe this is a product we should be looking at in New Jersey. And I was already thinking in terms of, we got to patent this thing, David, and market it for a great fee for the university and for further innovation. But I want to be absolutely clear, as we talk about having a green economy, as we talk about achieving renewable energy, it's a reality in this state because of the innovation at scale and the men and women and scientists that are right here at this university through the graduate school. I do want to point out that we have some challenges. And the challenges that we have, my staff's going to be mad at me because I haven't read from this at all, so please don't tell. Christine will. I want to talk about the challenges that we have going forward. The challenge that we have is, one is the parochial nature, which I'll talk more in detail in a few seconds. But we also have a challenge in education and training and preparation. Being such a small, compact state, we have just over 1 million people. Many people right now are very focused on the very challenging demographic that 11.2% of the people around are still unemployed, which is devastating. The real demographic we should be watching very carefully, and I think even more devastating, is not the fact that we have an unemployment rate. We have a significant, what we call, skills gap, education training gap in this state. In any given time, economists will tell you that a full employment economy is 5% or less. If you're in the 4 or 5% unemployment rate, you're very close to a full employment economy. In Rhode Island, that means in bodies, that's about a little over 500,000 people. When you discount seniors and retirees and children and whatever it might be, you're not going to have more than about 550 to 560,000 people at any given time in the Rhode Island market or workplace. And that's ages from 16 to 64. The challenge we have going forward is, if you match up the industry clusters and the companies that are growing in this region, in this state, growing meaning in capacity and size of company, in recruitment and employment, each and every one of them are unifying to the fact that their workforce is well-trained and well-educated. And it could be, again, life sciences, defense technology, marine sciences, any of those areas, advanced manufacturing. The one thing that joins together those industries and those companies is a tremendous need for a well-educated, well-trained workforce. In Rhode Island today, out of currently the people who are employed, not unemployed, but currently the people who are employed in Rhode Island, well over 50%, some numbers say as high as 57, others at 52, but well over 50% of the people currently employed in Rhode Island today have no consistent post-secondary education or training. Think of that. Half the people employed today have no post-secondary education and training. And I'm not talking about a PhD scientist or a medical doctor or a lawyer or an MBA. I'm talking about even certificates of education and training from a community college, a bachelor's degree. So we have a gap in this state, a significant gap, unlike anywhere else in New England, where we are creating jobs, quality jobs, high-skill, high-wage jobs. But very, very few Rhode Islanders have the basic education and training capabilities to fill those positions. Thus, a skill gap challenge. And the very nature that we're here in New England, it's a New England economy, not a Texas or California. A large percentage of the high-skill, high-wage jobs that we create in this state do not necessarily have to go to Rhode Islanders. We share borders with Massachusetts and Connecticut. We think it's a long way to go from Newport to Providence and down to URI and back to Providence, but you know what? A significant percentage of the men and women who are employed at General Dynamics at Quonset live in Connecticut. We're at Fidelity in Smithfield in Massachusetts. We're at Raytheon in Portsmouth, Massachusetts, and so on, because we share borders. So one of the challenges that we have is that as we continue to build our industries with innovation of scale and research collaborations, one of the great concerns will be how many fellow Rhode Islanders will have the basic access to skills and education to enter those positions. And again, it's not necessarily the PhD scientist. It's the lab assistant. It's the chemist assistant. It's great entry-level positions that need some level of defined post-secondary education and training. That is probably one of the most significant economic barriers that we have within the state. The university is dealing with that in so many levels. It needs to continue to deal with that in so many levels. The parochial nature. I'll end with this on a light note because being parochial is our standard. It's who we are as New Englanders. But we can't let it get in the way of innovation. We can't let it get in the way of collaboration. Being such a small state, government cannot continue to operate. When I say government, I mean all government, local, state, and some federal influence. Being in a state of this size, if we can't deliver government services more efficiently and effectively as compared to Texas or Pennsylvania, we should not exist. I'm not here to advocate for regionalizing school systems or public utility systems or public safety systems, but you kind of get it. We cannot continue to operate with 39 cities and towns, 36 school districts, 76 fire and public safety districts, because the cost of paying for that is stripping away our ability to reinvest and invest strategically in programs like STAC. That $1.4 million with the savings of having more efficient government could be 5.4 or 10.4. The money that we invest in URI to help you continue to build and expand your footprint here, in your laboratories, in your classrooms, to keep your tuitions in a level playing field for all kids to have access and students. We can't do those things because of the parochial nature of having to do things by community, by town, by region, by district. So the parochial nature will change. It's going to change by necessity because we're broke and we don't have those federal one-offs that we've depended upon before. So it's going to force us to think very strategically. But it also provides an opportunity for us to build upon the economic assets which are driven by research, scholarship, and innovation centered within the university. So I wanted to spend this 15 or 20 minutes talking about the big picture. This is a day of big ideas, the big idea of economic development. I wanted to convey the central role that you have and will continue to play as a land-based university in driving this going forward. But we need each and every one of you to continue to voice this openly and actively. We need to continue to tell this story to our policymakers and to our business leaders. We need to understand that Rhode Island will succeed, but it's based upon the resources that are right here in front of us. So again, thank you, and I'll be here for most of the afternoon. And again, it's been a great pleasure to share this with you. Thank you.
Now we're going to move on to our panel. We're a little bit behind time, but that's okay because we have room for lunch, and then you'll have to go through the posters. Keep in mind, the posters are also the main event for us, where the students and the faculty will present you their research. So next, continuing on this theme of the importance of the university in driving economic development with research and ideas, we will start with our panel of speakers, and we have three panelists that will cover the span from biomedical research all the way to the arts. And I'd like to start with Paul Hastings, who is one of our homegrown talents. Mr. Hastings is President and Chief Executive Officer of Oncomed. He brings more than 20 years of experience as a biotechnology and pharmaceutical industry executive. He managed firms that have developed promising treatments for cancer, multiple sclerosis, and macular degeneration. He is skilled in international strategic marketing and sales, venture capital and financing, and movement from early concept to product. He's president and CEO of Oncomed Pharmaceuticals, as I said, and his firm is developing innovative treatments that isolate and neutralize cancer stem cells to inhibit the formation of malignant tumors. Mr. Hastings also held a series of management positions of increasing responsibility at Genzyme Corporation, including serving as president of Genzyme Therapeutics Europe, as well as president of Worldwide Therapeutics. He is currently chairman of the board of the Bay Area Biosciences Association, Bay Bio in San Francisco, and serves on the executive committee of the board of directors of the Biotechnology Industry Association. He received his bachelor's degree of science in pharmacy from the University of Rhode Island. And I had a great pleasure listening to Paul last night at Diversity. He's the recipient of our Diversity Awards, and I look forward to an exciting presentation by Paul. Paul, please go.
What do I do now? Well, I live in a broke state also, by the way, California. And like your governor, our governor is taking his job seriously in managing the budget this year. And that can be painful for innovation in our industry, but it's absolutely essential. So while I'm a social liberal, I'm a fiscal conservative, and I think that if we don't manage our state budgets, we're going to all be toast. So we have to keep that in mind. And some of this bureaucracy and infrastructure that could be reinvested in science is another thing that I'm a big advocate of. So I also appreciate that your governor, like our governor, is investing in education. When I saw that in our alumni newsletter, I was very impressed. So I'm going to try to do this quickly. I'm going to start with this. When they asked me to do this, they wanted me to talk about translating what happens on those posters out there into products. And so I want you to know that the underpinnings of our company is right here, or are right here. These are patents that came out of the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, another broke state, by the way. Our founder was at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, in the Comprehensive Cancer Center, is now the deputy director of the Stanford Cancer Stem Cell Institute at Stanford University. All of these patents, isolating cancer stem cells, methods of use of cancer stem cells in research and development to discover and develop drugs, the pathways that we're using to discover cancer stem cell antibodies, all came out of patents at the University of Michigan. And here's that patent in action. By the way, this particular slide was the slide that raised us $17 million in our Series A financing back in 2004. And this is what Mike did at the University of Michigan, which was isolate this tiny subpopulation of cells. It's a heterogeneous group of cells. This is a human colon tumor. And we isolated this subpopulation of cells here. We could take one of these cells now and grow a robust tumor in a mouse model, in an immunocompromised mouse. And we take thousands of cells from what's the rest of the tumor, the bulk of the tumor. No tumors grow. So when we remove that tumor from the mouse, it looks identical to the human tumor. That is our screen. That is what we use to screen all of our compounds. No cell lines. Human tumor xenograft. This is as close to a human tumor in a mouse that you'll ever get, and that is the underpinning of our company. As I mentioned before, that patent, this slide, translated into a $17 million Series A that we raised in 2004. Where are we now? We've raised, actually this number has moved from $273 million to $300 million because we just received a check for $20 million for filing an IND on our third compound. But we got a group of investors that did that Series A financing. These investors, by the way, one of the other reasons I'm in California is that's where where Silicon Valley is, and that's where venture capital is. And venture capital tends to stay isolated and clustered in certain areas like Boston and like San Francisco. Boston is only not a half an hour away from here. What's an hour and a half? Not too far away. So you have a very similar dynamic here in the Northeast that we have in California, where you have a lot of venture capital. And we raised a lot of money in venture capital, but we've also fueled the raising of that cash through our partnerships with Bayer and GlaxoSmithKline. So this is taking that xenograft to the next level. This slide raised us $43 million in our Series B financing. So we took that science, we took that xenograft model, and we converted it to a model where we grow a tumor in that xenograft model and screen our antibodies, actually inject the antibodies into that mouse, and flatline a tumor. So we've taken combination chemotherapy plus our antibody, stop giving the chemotherapy around about at the time you would stop giving it in humans when the chemotherapy is toxic, continue the mice on the antibody, and we have that yellow line, which is a flatline tumor. We then repeat this experiment, stop it right here, and we look at a limiting dilution assay to see, you got a pointer there? Thank you. To see the frequency of cancer stem cells in those tumors. So in other words, how many cells does it take to grow a tumor in the next xenograft model? And what we see is that with our antibody, we reduce the frequency of cancer stem cells. Chemotherapy, and this happens in virtually all the models we use, actually increases the frequency of cancer stem cells. So chemotherapy goes after the bulk of the tumor, those non-tumorigenic cells that were in my first slide, whereas these antibodies are targeted at that heterogeneous small subpopulation. But what's really interesting is when we combine the antibody with chemotherapy, we have a synergistic effect on reducing cancer stem cell frequency. This is a great finding. This was a $43 million financing finding and led us to then do a collaboration with GlaxoSmithKline. So while this raised us $43 million through venture capital, it also, I'm sorry, I'm talking about antibodies next, but let me go right to this slide, led to a collaboration where GlaxoSmithKline gave us $35 million up front. 17.5 of that was in equity, 17.5 of that was just cash up front, and multiple milestone payments that lead up to $1.4 billion in milestones to develop drugs against the Notch pathway, which was, by the way, one of the patents on that first slide I showed you. So that patent led to a xenograft model. That xenograft model led to a screening model where we tested our antibodies. Once we could show in that animal model that we could shrink a tumor and maintain the shrinkage of that tumor, the flatlining of that tumor, we were able to convince our colleagues at GlaxoSmithKline that we could take those preclinical models and convert them into human clinical trials and filing of an IND and antibodies. So now, this particular antibody to the Notch pathway, and this is an anti-DLO4 antibody, delta-like ligand antibody, is in phase 1 and phase 1b clinical trials in the U.S., Australia, and New Zealand, and is basically in combination with commonly used chemotherapeutic agents in humans. From the original phase 1 study, that led to another $5 million milestone. So as you can see, the money adds up as you complete your milestones, as you can continue, by the way, to develop your patents. This is that collaboration I just mentioned. We developed another pathway using cancer stem cells and cancer stem cell technology, which is the Wnt pathway. Many of you who are in science understand the Wnt pathway and understand that there are 10 receptors and 10 ligands. We cloned them all, and we have developed antibodies to all of them. Antibodies to single receptors, antibodies to multiple receptors. And there's an antibody that we've developed to multiple frizzled receptors that is now just recently filed an IND and will enter the clinic probably in the next 2 months. That led to a $40 million cash upfront deal with Bayer Sharing Healthcare, which then allowed the company to move forward. And in this particular slide, same xenograft model, frizzled antibody, flatline tumors, was even synergistic with chemotherapy. Okay, the characteristics of cancer stem cells are that they either self-replicate or they differentiate. What we were able to do with this antibody is to show that we could take a tumor cell, or a tumor, this is a pancreatic tumor, and actually convert these cancer cells into these green dyed cells. Those are mucin-producing cells. We converted a cancer into a ball of mucus. That is what this is. Okay, so when the technician, not one of our 40 PhDs, but one of our technicians, removed the tumor from the mouse, it was as big as the tumor in the control group, but it was squishy. And when we did histopath on that tumor, this is what we found. This led to a $40 million collaboration with Bayer. We were able to take a tumor and convert the cells in that tumor into these mucin-producing cells, which eventually become metabolized and basically melt away. So, where did that come from? Patents from the University of Michigan. So I hope that any of you who are out there presenting your posters today realize that your poster, if you do it right, and if you approach the right people, can potentially lead to the formation of companies. Oncomed is now 75 employees. We started, of course, with 0 in 2004. We're probably going to grow to about 82 employees. We're still an early-stage discovery company. We actually made money last year on our discovery by getting those collaborations. How will we fuel the company going forward? 10 years ago, by the way, this is my 6th company. 10 years ago, this company would be public. 10 years ago, this company would probably be 400 employees. That is not the way it's going to work today. We're going to stay 75 to 80 employees. By the way, another company in the Bay Area called Plexicon, 75 employees, just sold itself for $800 million to Daiichi Sankyo. So staying lean and mean is not a bad thing, and focusing on what you do well is not a bad thing. The one thing that we could never do, by the way, is commercialize these antibodies. It's going to take another $1 billion to commercialize these antibodies. So That's why we need those corporate partners. We're in the business of discovering and developing innovation into products that the big pharmaceutical companies and the big biotech companies can then commercialize with us. Eventually, we'll be able to produce our own product. 20 years ago in biotechnology, what we did was we started these companies, we discovered these products, we developed these products, and we grew into companies like Genzyme, where I used to work. That's not happening today. So you have to be flexible and think about where your business is going to take you. If you can turn science into a business, and by the way, in our company, 75 employees, there's maybe 5 of us that are not scientists. So I raise money and I make coffee and I do deals, okay? What I do with those scientists is raise the money to allow them to continue to do the science and not worry about where the next dollar is coming from, so that we can then move on and continue to work with our pharmaceutical partners and hopefully eventually have our own product on the market. So thanks for listening to my talk, and hopefully some of those posters out there will turn into the next OncoMed in Rhode Island.
Thank you very much. And I hope that with our poster, Paul, we have a drug that we'd like to further develop. Next, we have, this is a very good example that Paul has presented, how research in a university just developing the ability to isolate those cancer stem cells can then lead to further work of developing ways to force them to differentiate and to developing treatments. So all the work that goes on in universities can definitely drive economic development. Next, we'll get a very good example of this and some more discussion on what innovation really means from Leslie Tato. And Leslie Tato is Chief Executive Officer of Rhode Island Manufacturing Extension Services. Leslie has over 22 years of experience in the service and manufacturing industry. Early on in her career, she served as a sales and marketing manager for firms in the industrial and medical products industries. Over the past 16 years, Leslie has held leadership positions with 3 nonprofit organizations. She was the director of operations for the Greater Rhode Island Regional Employment and Training Board, the executive director of the Rhode Island Manufacturers Association, and is currently the chief executive officer of the Rhode Island Manufacturing Extension Services, Inc., which is abbreviated as RIMES. RIMES manufacturing community supports the sustainability and growth of the Rhode Island manufacturing community with technical engineering and continuous improvement of services to improve the competitive position of the industry. Leslie currently serves as a member of the board of directors for the Northern Rhode Island Chamber of Commerce and the Small Business Loan Fund Corporation. Previously, she has served as a commissioner for the County College of Rhode Island's 21st Century Workforce Commission, board chair for the North Kingstown Chamber of Commerce, and was a member of the Rhode Island School to Career Region 2 Board of Directors. Leslie is also a volunteer for the Air National Guard's Family Readiness Program, the 143rd Airlift Wing. So Leslie will talk to us about innovation and its role in economic development. We're really very glad that you could be here, Leslie, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you. So good morning. Thank you for being here today. I'm hoping that you're going to get a lot of takeaways. I've kind of geared some of my comments to some students, so I hope there are students still hanging around and hopefully some in the back, because it's really about you, because you're the next generation of innovators that we're trying to grow. So I really wanted to focus some of my comments there today. Next on this one. Oh, I'm having technology problems. There we go. I want to talk to you a little bit about a study that they did down at Georgia Tech that looked at manufacturers, and they wanted them to rank 6 strategies based on their importance for those manufacturers that were competing for sales. So they looked at low price, high quality, innovations in new technology, quick delivery, and adapting to customer needs. Found the study fascinating because across all 6 of those strategies, the results revealed that the innovation strategies that were associated with the highest mean and return on sales were innovations, up 14%. They knew that they were going to generate more out of innovation and technology than any of the things that they could do, because if you start looking at quick delivery strategies and high quality and customer needs, to me, quality and getting it to your customer faster and your price, those are all givens just to play in the marketplace. It was the innovations that were the differentiators, where they knew that they were going to gain the most market share if they could innovate products and consistently meet a customer demand. So they were looking for those very highly engineered, high technology products where that's where they knew they were going to gain the largest market share. So innovation is a team sport, and anyone says that it is not a team sport, that this is solo activity, that scientists sit at the workbench and they create all of these things and they do that solo and automatically it comes out and they can commercialize that project, it's wrong. It is a team sport, and it takes a ton of people involved in every step of the process to make innovation and deploy that innovation to a commercialized product. So manufacturers are working in a team environment. Current existing manufacturers, they're a complex network of very highly skilled employees that make that individual manufacturing company work. And they all working together to create innovative products that address a customer's need. But if you look at the industry, they are also working in a team environment. They have individuals that are engineers and business developers and entrepreneurs. The entrepreneurial spirit is in high demand. To make sure that if you're working in the industry, you have to have that entrepreneurial spirit. And they want the scientists, and then you have to have the financial people, and all of those people work in a team environment to make the entire industry work, because it's that collaboration that will take it to the next level. So what is innovation? It is not an R&D pipeline. It's a network of reinforcing ideas and joint problem solving. I think if we can teach students, one of the most critical things that we can teach students are creative and complex problem solving. Because everything is about solving a customer's need. There is a need that is out there, they have a problem, and if we can help them solve that problem, you end up with really good products in the marketplace. That's where the demand is coming from. So to me, network interaction trumps linear. Deloitte did a great study on emerging technologies and emerging industries in New England. And traditional linear terms like R&D pipeline and supply chains, they're not accurate description of what goes on in the industry now. These are clusters of advanced capabilities with people working on common problems, working together to solve problems, and they're leveraging resources in order to do that. So network interaction trumps the linear, in my land, at least. So opportunity. We have the opportunity to leverage the current focus on jobs in the economy and build on the earlier successes in the manufacturing industry. Keith gave a great example this morning of what's been done here just in Rhode Island in manufacturing. It is the birthplace of manufacturing. But if we focus more on collaboration of industry and government and education, advanced manufacturing will then go to the next level. But it is going to take that collaboration to ensure that that does in fact happen, that we can create those next jobs of the future. But it will take the collaborative efforts to make that happen in a systemic, sustainable way. I love this. I don't know for you academic folks, Ned Hill, he's a dean at Cleveland State University, and this quote hit me. You cannot have higher incomes if you do not have higher earnings. You cannot have higher earnings unless you have higher productivity. You cannot have higher productivity unless your workforce is highly skilled, educated, and flexible. And you cannot have higher productivity unless you sell your products with higher margins. And economic development is first about products. And only if you sell the products does it become about jobs. We need to make sure that we are deploying those technologies and working with those collaborations. Those are the jobs that you all are going to have the opportunity to take advantage of in the future. It's your research, it's your education, it's the mentoring from your professors here that will take you to the next level. Hopefully when we get the interface with the industry and the community, if we all work together, These are the jobs of the future. This is how we end up with economic development that's sustainable. So we can get out of the discussions of there isn't enough money. We have a budget deficit. Jobs cure a lot of ills, and I say if we all work together, we can make sure that we can cure those ills and make sure everybody gets to work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Leslie. And that's, to our students and our faculty, just be aware that whatever you do in engineering can be translated into machines and to devices. And so that really drives jobs and economic development. We had two presentations about development of biopharmaceutical products, and also in terms of manufacturing and engineering. But you have to also remember that the arts play an important role in our lives. Not only do they enrich our lives, but the arts also draw people to come and visit our state, visit our active districts in Providence, and with these visitors brings a lot of money. They also bring us a lot of recognition. So this event is about our entire campus, from the sciences, engineering, and the arts. And for that, we're really very honored to have Umberto Stranca here. He's the founding artistic director of AS220. Umberto is the founder of AS220, which is a nonprofit center for the arts in Providence, for those of you who are not aware of that. And it was established in 1985 to provide a local forum for the arts. Umberto has been committed to the revitalization of downtown and plays an important role in community efforts across the region. He served on Providence Mayor Cicilline's Arts, Culture, and Tourism Advisory Board, and currently sits on the board of Providence's Downtown Improvement District. Broad Street Studio, AS220's Youth Arts Program, also established by Umberto, continues to serve and support youth transitioning out of state care. A visual and performing artist with a long exhibition history, Umberto has been an artist in residence at the New England Center for Contemporary Arts in Brooklyn, Connecticut, and had 4 solo shows at AS220 and solo exhibits at the Galleria del Corso, Latina, Italy, and the Newport Art Museum, Newport, Rhode Island. His work is in the permanent collections of both the Museum of Art at Rhode Island School of Design and the Newport Art Museum. In 2010, Rick awarded him the Charles B. Williard Professional Achievement Award for his commitment to the arts, education, and the community. He will tell us the story of the transformation of AS220 into providing a local forum and home for the arts through the maintenance of residential and work studios, galleries, performance, and educational space. Umberto.
Yeah, I'm the arts guy, so I'm the kooky one. And I will do my best to live up to that to some extent. I'm going to steal something from Leslie's presentation. There was a quote up there that said, network of reinforcing ideas and joint problem solving. And we'll kind of get back to that. But the first thing before we look at pictures is I'm going to take you very quickly to the sort of path of AS220 that's going to be an incredibly incomplete story. Okay? 1982, I collaborated with some artists to write a manifesto that trashed everything in the arts. All museums, art schools, institutions, funding sources, and everything. Accused it all of being elitist. I think I still believe in most of that document. But what happened in that process was the concept of AS220 was created in my brain. And the primary sort of underlying value or opportunity that AS220 was intended to do was to create an uncurated and uncensored environment for any artist in the state of Rhode Island who owned their material in any medium to perform or exhibit. We didn't open after my journeying around the world and this and that. I came back and started AS220 with $800 in 1985 in an illegal loft space on Way Boston Street. If you remember downtown Providence in 1985, you could park wherever you wanted. And you could probably bowl down Main Street, and we in fact did drive some golf balls off the roofs of some of the buildings. This was on Richmond Street. This was in Weybosset on the third floor of the Performing Arts Center had just opened. And I think Lynn thought, and I may have told him that we were kind of creating a coffee house type thing, and I think given his age, he was thinking 60s and James Taylor, and I was thinking all night raves and hip hop and open mics and things like that. And Lynn very generously told us that he really thought what we were doing was very important, but we're probably going to have to do it somewhere else, and that was after about 3 months in the Performing Arts Center. We can get into all kinds of anecdotal stories about that. Understand that I was washing dishes at the time. I had dematerialized from a former life with a house in the suburbs and 2 cars and crystal and dining room and all that kind of stuff and silverware. But now I was washing dishes to realize this dream. We moved to Richmond Street, which was completely boarded up at the time. The building we moved into was a non-functioning building. We ran our own water without inspectors or whatever. We had no licenses to put on performances or to entertain the public. And we had groups like Green Day play there when they were on the rise. And this thing quickly began to build a momentum. And it took a while for both the community and even the artists to understand the opportunity that was being presented. And I'll talk a little bit more what I mean by that opportunity in a little bit. After some time there, we got a letter from the licensing board in the city of Providence after they started reading some reviews of shows that were happening in a space that wasn't on the books. And they suggested I visit them before they visited me, and we started working out. This was under Mayor Cianci's administration. For me, a benevolent dictator. And we started talking. Nothing was happening in the city, so I like to think that ASU 20 was sort of like the pilot light, while everything was beginning to go away. A number of live music venues had closed, and it was really a very, very bad and hard time in Providence at the time. So I feel like ASU 20 was kind of the pilot light, and I think Buddy Cianci came to the same realization that we need to fan this flame. And he was extremely supportive in the ways he could be, which were numerous. After a certain time, we sort of maximized the potential, and we were living there, we were doing performances there, and realized that, and also it would change landlords, property values started to rise in the area, in the neighborhood. We were beginning to get price out of the space that we didn't own. And I started a campaign with a number of other people called the Build ASU 20 campaign, and the idea was we were going to own our own building, we were going to develop our own building downtown. Now, let's think about the practicality of this. We were a $100,000 a year organization, one-page staff person making minimum wage, and we said we were going to own and renovate a building in downtown Providence. Anything is possible, isn't it? Well, the city showed us a building that was in horrific condition. The entire block was drug and prostitution trade. The building was collapsing on itself. The city had some leverage in back taxes and whatnot, and said to me, how about this place? And we said, perfect. It had double-loaded corridors. It was a 3-story building. It was a mercantile building. Its history, very similar to the kinds of uses of when you think of artists as small business people and entrepreneurial. It actually was, made perfect sense in the way the building was laid out, the humility of the building, and its potential uses from its architectural point of view and everything else. Today, 3 buildings in downtown Providence, 100,000 square feet, completely legal. 48 live work studios, 40 or so are affordable. There's only a handful of market rate, 14 work studios, a number of galleries with a 3-year waiting list, performance space that only holds 200 people but gets 50 to 150 requests per week from around the world of performers who want to perform there, and our obligation is still to serve primarily Rhode Island artists. We have a youth program that is about a $400,000 a year program that serves young people in our juvenile detention facility and tries to build an appetite for arts, creativity, and learning and self-realization. while we're with them there, and hope that that's an insatiable appetite that we can try to satisfy when they get out. So the idea is that they connect with us when we get out, we continue to provide opportunities for them, begin to define themselves differently, begin to tell their story differently. Art is not judgmental. Most of these kids have spent their entire life being judged, being told that they need to be fixed. We tell them they have a powerful story, and we want to give them the tools to be able to tell it, and we want to be able to provide them the tools to be able to have control of their own narrative. That's we have about half the incarcerated population we work with at a given time. We have about 150 kids enrolled in our classes in the community at any given time. We work in every medium with the kids, from highly technical things to in terms of recording and mastering music, and even working in CAD design with some kids and many who have 5th, 6th, 7th grade reading levels. And they have no problem adapting to contemporary technology in the computer world. They are not afraid of computers. What is all this? And we also deal with young people in group homes and foster care. So it's really the DCYF community of young people that we work with. Within our buildings are mixed-use buildings, which we feel is the most responsible way to develop. And part of it, the first floors have triple net market rate tenants and help subsidize the performance. We also pay property taxes, by the way, as a nonprofit. We perform them in our projects. Again, 100,000 square feet, 3 buildings. We have a number of nonprofit tenants in our buildings. So we have Perishable Theater, College Visions, which is a college access program that we nurtured into existence. We have nurtured a number of other nonprofits and incubated another Youth in Action, the Black Repertory Theater, College Visions now, and a number of others that we're working with now to nurture them into existence. People come to us with good ideas because they think that we accomplished the impossible, and that's what it feels like to them in the early stages of developing their ideas. We also have the for-profits, commercial tenants, always local businesses, always bringing them up to another level, never a chain, and we have a barber shop, 2 bars, a locksmith, one local 121 is a restaurant, 1 acres in one of our buildings. Today we have a $2.5 million budget, and that's really low considering the wages that we pay. We have an equal pay policy. I make the same wage as the most recent hire. We pay 100% of their health care, and pretty flexible hours, assuming that we're getting their work done. We have 50 employees, 25 part-time, 25 full-time, 50,000 people who participate in AS20 in the course of the year in any variety of ways, as audience or whatever. We have a restaurant and a bar, which is also a kind of an earned income component. We have 7 for-profit corporations underneath the nonprofit of AS20, and I hear anybody to explain how it all works. Part of the reason for that is because in the last 2 real estate projects, we accessed a federal new market and historic tax credits, and the federal government will not issue tax credits to a nonprofit, and the tax credit holders are partners in limited liability partnerships. And then beneath that, we have to create a management company to manage the property for the property, so blah, 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 bing, and huge amounts of legal fees and to sort it out. And the sort of flow charts and everything in regards to our, what appears on the surface to be a relatively straightforward business, are unreadable. They're like fluxes of data works of art. It's absolutely profound from an artist's point of view in their incomprehensibility, or whatever, if that's a real word. We are still injured in that sense. And I think what I want to do now is maybe show you a few pictures. By the way, we've also nurtured and have incubated people. Our last development director is now the press secretary for the new mayor of the city of Providence, and we really have incubated a lot of leaders in the community. And I think our management model and our style, everybody that runs a program at AS20 has a huge amount of ownership in their program. We isolate their budgets for every program. They're acutely aware year to date where they stand against budget. I mean, I think it's a pretty interesting and very contemporary business model in the way we operate. Artists, have been filmed, and a lot of other people have sort of characterized artists as being flaky and unfocused and irresponsible, and I challenge that. Okay. So this is the thing that's going to make me do slides. Now, this is a very inadequate, because they told me I had 15 minutes, which I probably already overrun, which is impossible for me, absolutely absurd. So the slides are inadequate, not perfectly well chosen, but they'll help. So you got a little bit of the history. The Performing Arts Center, where we originally started, was on the 3rd floor. This was the second space, the second floor, what was a non-functioning abandoned building. Behind that wall, there were 4 or 5 live spaces, about 300-400 square feet each. So part of the way we subsidized the rent was by artists participating as volunteers and helping to run the program, but also by contributing some money to pay the rent. This is all not, we kept real books and paid bills, but we were not a corporation, we were not a nonprofit, the building wasn't up to code. I can tell you fabulous stories about all that. Maybe after. The mission, which we're going through a rework right now. If you hearing me in the back, because I'll yell. So you can read that quickly. And we added education and a number of things over the years and modified it accordingly. This was what the original building looked like. This is what it looks like now. This is our staff outside in the summer having a staff meeting. Our restaurant and bar, which is the initial access, and our restaurant. So ASU20 opens a restaurant. If ASU20 is going to open a restaurant, what are the underlying values in regards to food? So we said it has to have a low price point, under $10. We only want to work with local purveyors and farmers. It has to have real vegan and vegetarian offerings. We want you to provide entry-level job experience for some of the kids in our youth program. It's an equal pay policy. This is in the job description, right? And a few other things. And we also want some items that are below that price point that are undeniably filling, so that my artist friends couldn't. I know they absolutely have options where they want to take a nap later for $5. Okay, and then I told the applicants, and we want to make money. So naturally, when we got down to final candidates, I sent them to a shrink because I had to understand why they really wanted the job. And our restaurant is wildly successful, by the way. So it's always, every decision we make, there are a set of underlying values that we test the idea with and develop the plan. A little more sense, an Irish session that happens on Saturday in the bar cafe. Shepherd Ferry, we initiated 2 years ago a free culture award. There's a lot of talk here about the state, its potential, innovation, and all with some implications of branding, I think. A lot of people are trying to bring life back to the urban centers, and a lot of them are using arts as one of the vehicles to do that. So, of course, ASU20 wants to take a different spin. So if we're going to do that, then what kind of artists do we want to celebrate? And we want to celebrate people who are really pushing the limits, creating dialogue in the world. Shepherd Ferry, as you may know, who created the Obama Hope poster, started in Providence when he was a RISD student. We've maintained a relationship with him. We brought him back and gave him ASU20's first Free Culture Award, commissioned the largest Shepherd Ferry mural in the world. And next year, we're probably going to give it to Guillermo Gomez Peña, who works a lot with immigration issues and border issues, and probably give him the Free Culture Award in 2012. So the idea was that not only are we going to use artists and art to help define ourselves and rebrand ourselves, but what kind of artists? So that Providence, once again, can set itself apart from other cities. So it's always going to be artists that we give this award that are really pushing the edges of things around intellectual property and all kinds of ideas. That's Shepherd, sweetheart. This is people waiting around the corner for a panel discussion with Shepherd and Lawrence Lessig, who copy left, and the whole free culture term was stolen from him. He was a Harvard professor and started this whole open sourcing sort of copywriting and people taking more control of their own copywriting and defining how people may or may not access or use their intellectual property. Just a sense of the performance space. Again, a sense of the performance space. Our kids run their own programs and shows within our performance space in our galleries. And if you wouldn't mind taking a second to read this, because this is in our youth studio on the wall. This is our metal detector. This was written with staff, with our kids. When we first started the youth program, we have a lot of kids who have had histories with gang activity. They come in with their own kind of territorial and prejudices, and we had to make it clear and define it. So every kid that gets involved in our program, not only do they read this on the wall, but they have to read it and sign it on a piece of paper, and it goes in a file. More by youths. Work studio at ASU 20. The third floor communal. In our living, we have 3 styles of living. So there's a communal living that's very affordable. And we never want to get rid of that model. That's where we started. Then we have small efficiency loft studio apartments for us, and then much bigger ones. And then I want to make a graveyard next door so you can go from one to the other to the other. I'm only half kidding. You know the attractions of the graveyards in Paris? Again, this is actually a live-work studio. This is the second building we developed. Some of you may have been in this building. It's absolutely fabulous. We've won a few historic restoration awards. And behind that is the third building that is, we've been doing a ribbon cutting. It's almost 100% occupied, which is another 50,000 square foot building. ASU 20 has doubled its footprint twice in the last 7 years. So we went from 25 to 50 to 100 in the last 7 years, square feet. Of one of our community shops, the print shop, we have a community photo lab, and we have a technology center, which is about desktop fabrication. It involves software, electronics, small desktop fabrication, laser cutters, and things like that. That lab was built in partnership with, I hope I can I use the name of another university in my talk here? Okay. That was built in partnership with the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. We're part of a network of fab labs around the world, about 35 of them, which is comes from the brain of Neil Gershon, fellow from MIT Center for Bits and Atoms. So some of the unique kinds of things and inclusiveness of what we do, equal pay, public programming, good work studios, commercial tenants, as you can read, and free culture. So there's a ton more. Like I told you, whatever time I did, I probably went over, and I apologize if I did. I think there's only one thing I want to end with, and that, in the early days of ASU 20, we had a hard time with national foundations. Now they're calling us. So we have recently gotten bed with Ford and Preston Foundation and people like that, looking at us as a national model. The big concern with a lot of national funders and foundations at the time was, if it's an unjury and uncensored place, how do you ensure quality? And my patented response to those folks was, you ensure quality by providing opportunity. We have not been good judges of what will last and what is critically important in our own lifetimes. If you think of people like Van Gogh and Henry Miller's folks being banned in Boston. But what we can do in almost a compost way of thinking, and municipalities and government can create environments that are nurturing, that provide safe places to fail, to explore, to experiment, a critical part of the process. So I think this, and now I think this is where we come full circle with the quote I stole: network of reinforcing ideas and joint problem solving, which was a quote from Lessons. So I think, and I want to make it very, very clear, there are no boundaries between science and art, creativity, innovation, creative economies, all of these things, these little buzz phrases now. I think it's the reality we are really, truly moving into. Thank you.
Thank you very much. What a great example of urban revitalization. I'd like to invite you now to go to really the main event we have here is really the posters. A lot of the students are already out there. They're all afraid of sitting here because somebody may come and visit their poster. And so this is like a conflict. But there is food. There's a lot of posters, about 100 of them. So don't be, you can go down this alley. There's on the side. There's on this side of the building. There's food on both ends, this side and the north end. Please go in, enjoy, some food, and enjoy mainly some of the food for thought as you go through the posters and visit with each, group. And I hope that you will be impressed. And we look forward to seeing you again and again. Thank you very much.